Matt Schaff and Jared Smola of DraftSharks.com to get you ready for your Week 10 waiver wire runs. And on this trade deadline edition, Jared, let's start with a couple guys who switched teams this Tuesday. And it begins with the Bears moving Khalil Herbert to the Bengals. Cincinnati needed him, of course, because Zach Moss is now expected to miss at least the rest of the regular season with his neck injury. So beyond that, why should I be interested in Khalil Herbert?
I'm a card-carrying member of the Khalil Herbert fan club, so I got plenty of stats on Herbert. I think he's a good runner, and the numbers would back that up. He has a 4.8 career yards per carry average. That's 10th best among 66 running backs with 200 plus carries over the last 4 seasons since Herbert entered the NFL. He's also 10th among those 66 in yards after contact per attempt over that span. He's 14th among those 66 in missed tackles forced per attempt. So it's funny. I actually think Herbert is an upgrade over Zach Moss for the Bengals, despite the Bengals going out and signing Zach Moss and not sort of just taking Herbert because they needed him. I don't think Herbert can do the passing game stuff that Zach Moss had still been doing for the Bengals before he went down. I do expect, though, Herbert to take over the ball carrying role that Moss had been playing. Now, Moss for the season averaged 9.3 carries per game, but that dropped to 6.5 carries per game over the last 4 as we've seen Chase Brown just take a bigger share of this backfield. So that's kind of the range I'm going to be expecting for Herbert, 6, 7, 8 carries per game. Not enough to make him a fantasy option unless he can, prove to be good enough to take more from Chase Brown. But at minimum, he's a strong handcuff. He's like the number 2 back in this high scoring Bengals offense. So just as a handcuff, I think he's worth rostering in at least fantasy leagues of 12 plus teams.
I agree with that. I think he's worth rostering. I think he's a handcuff. I think he is a good fit for the rushing that Zach Moss leaves behind, but I don't think he's a good bet to overtake Chase Brown or take rushing work away from Brown. And like you said, has been less of a receiving bet than Zach Moss has been over the past couple of years. And that was kind of the thing that kept Zach Moss from being totally marginalized behind Chase Brown as he got passed. So a nice spot, certainly better than in Chicago where he wasn't getting anything, but also going to be tough to find much value unless Chase Brown gets hurt. Of course, if Chase Brown does get hurt, then Khalil Herbert should be the lead back in a very good spot to be the lead back. Just before we started recording, we had the Jets agree to send Mike Williams to the Steelers. Now, Pittsburgh has been reportedly trying to get a wide receiver ever since the summer. Names like Brandon Ayuk getting thrown out there. They traded away Deontay Johnson, which seems weird at this point based on that pursuit of a wide receiver, but it's worth remembering that they did that to get a starting corner who has been good for them, Dante Jackson. So that aside, Mike Williams to the Steelers. What do we make of this? Is Mike Williams actually going to be fantasy relevant the rest of the way?
I'm not super optimistic. I think it's a good move for Pittsburgh. I think Mike Williams is a pretty clear upgrade over Van Jefferson. I think he's a good fit with Russell Wilson, right? Who likes throwing downfield, is not afraid to throw contested balls. That's Mike Williams' game. So I think it helps Russell Wilson, who, I still don't think is going to become a quarterback 1 option, but is at least an asset in 2 quarterback super flex leagues. Mike Williams, I don't think he's going to threaten George Pickens at all for the number 1 receiver role for these Steelers. I think he's the clear number 2. And the Steelers, even with Russell Wilson starting over the last 2 weeks, 50% neutral pass rate, 48% total pass rate, just 28.5 pass attempts per game. This is still an Arthur Smith offense. They still don't want to throw it more than they have to. I don't think there's going to be enough volume to go around to make Williams a consistent fantasy starter.
Yeah, they could use more help at wide receiver, but I don't think that they went to get Mike Williams because they're about to go pass heavy, especially because Williams hasn't looked good for the Jets this year. He's working on the worst numbers since his 2017 rookie campaign in PFF receiving grade, catch rate, yards per route, yards after catch per reception, coming off last year's injury, just doesn't look like the full version of himself. So it'll be a good pickup for them. It's probably not going to make that much of a fantasy impact. You can check our rest of season rankings to see exactly where we have put Williams, see if it might be relevant for your specific league. Now onto the guys that did not change teams today. And we'll start at running back, where Ray Davis, we've talked about on here before, and he's going to pop on waivers some this week because of a 63-yard catch and run touchdown against the Dolphins this past Sunday, Jared. But that was one of just 6 touches in the game for him. He's actually seen exactly 6 touches in 3 straight games. So we're not talking about Ray Davis as a standalone fantasy asset right now, but a prime handcuff, right?
Yeah, prime handcuff. We already saw him have the big game in the one game James Cook missed. Nothing changed with Davis's role last week. His snap rate, 14%. It was actually the 3rd lowest of the season. Had a 7% route rate. You look at his share of Bill's carries, kind of right in line with where it's been in these healthy James Cook games. So chance that the big touchdown, catch and run earns him more work going forward. I feel like we've said that like twice or 3 times this season. Ray Davis, a borderline RB1 if James Cook misses more time going forward.
Trey Benson in the same vein for the Cardinals, 9 touches this past Sunday in the win over the Bears. That tied for his second highest total of the season. His 55 scrimmage yards were a season high for him, and he scored his first NFL touchdown in that game, a game that also saw Amari Demarcado score. It also saw James Conner play his second smallest snap share of the season at 48%. But similar to what we were just saying with Ray Davis, I don't think you're picking up Trey Benson this week because you can start him anytime soon. It's more about grabbing a handcuff before somebody else does, right?
I think so. And we'll see how this evolves. We're talking about a rookie running back. Those guys tend to improve throughout the season. We're talking about an older back in James Conner with injury history. So we'll see. Benson has the 3 games with 8+ carries this season. They came in a 41-10 win for the Cardinals, a 42-14 loss. And then this past week, they won 29-9 versus the Bears. So Benson's busier games have all been in spots where the Cardinals have, either been playing from well ahead or playing from well behind. Even if you look at the first half of this Bears game, it was 11 carries for James Conner to 3 for Trey Benson. Now it finished 18 carries for Conner to 8 for Benson. Demarcado got 4. And head coach Jonathan Gannon said after the game that he loved the distribution of carries in this game. So maybe they want to get Benson, involved to this level going forward. That'd be a knock against Conner. It's not enough to make Benson a standalone fantasy option though. So for now, he's still just a handcuff with a chance to, maybe gain work as we move throughout the second half of the season.
An upside to being a handcuff with James Conner, as we've talked about before, because of the injury history, because of the injury risk with Conner. And we actually mentioned it on our week 7 preview pod, calling out Benson as a good stash at that point for, this kind of reason. As the season wears on, it would make sense for the Cardinals to work Benson in more, even if James Conner is still healthy. And then if he goes down, there's a lot more work available for Benson, and the end of season schedule remains very strong for whoever is leading the Arizona backfield at that point. So I think stashing Trey Benson now is a good idea if you can help it. If you've had Ty Chandler stashed, it's probably time to not do that anymore, because we saw him play 0 offensive snaps in Sunday night's game against the Colts. And we watched Cam Akers instead apparently take over the number 2 running back role for the Vikings. So we're just swapping them out at this point, right?
Yeah, swapping them out. Kevin O'Connell gave us the olds. We're still going to see Ty Chandler in his post-game press conference. Cam Akers had the hot hand, got off to a good start. That's why he was the only one to play. I do think if Aaron Jones went down, that we'd see both these guys. No one would get the Aaron Jones role, but I do think Akers is the better handcuff at this point. I think he's, kind of down the handcuff list at this point, because again, I don't think it'd be a clear lead back situation. If you're stashing one of the Vikings backups, it should be Akers over Chandler at this point.
Yeah, I'd be far more interested in handcuffing Trey Benson to James Conner than I would handcuffing Cam Akers to Aaron Jones. Because like you said, I think this would be a shared backfield. I don't think either one would be especially helpful to our fantasy lineups if Aaron Jones goes down.
For sure. Even if I have Aaron Jones, I'd rather stash Trey Benson and just kind of hope you double dip and get 2 starters. Because again, even if Jones goes down, I don't think we're going to feel great about starting Cam Akers.
Agreed. We already got that shot in Houston, and he's no longer a Texan. Over to quarterback now. Drake Maye, Jared, has started 4 NFL games. He left one of those in the first half with a concussion. The other 3 have found him finishing QB8, QB7, and QB11 in fantasy. The QB11 was the most recent weekend, and he did so despite just 206 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, but also 95 yards rushing against the Titans. And it's not like he had a 65 or 70 yard run to inflate that. His long was 26. So 8 carries, good yardage. We already knew he could run. And for me, there are 2 takeaways on Drake Maye from that performance in particular. One, a better defense probably would have made it a worse fantasy day for him. The Titans are not very good, but the other part of that is Maye can deliver fantasy points even on a bad offensive day, as we just watched and as we saw in his first start against Houston.
Yeah, super impressive what he's doing, and very encouraging for his dynasty stock. Obviously, I still struggle trusting him as a quarterback 1 in fantasy. He's a guy, every Monday I sit down and do projections, and Drake Maye comes out lower than you think he should based on these fantasy finishes so far. The finishes you mentioned, Matt, 3 top 11 quarterback finishes. I think think a couple things. One, he has 6 passing touchdowns through 3 games. I don't think that's going to keep up. This is a Patriots team. Every single week, they're near the bottom of the league in implied points. They're implied for 16.5 points this week. That's the second lowest, I believe. Passing touchdowns, I don't think he's going to keep throwing 2 per game. And then the rushing. I mean, he's averaging 5.3 carries, 50 rushing yards per game. That's a 17-game pace of 856 rushing yards. Drake May's mobile. He's not going to keep up this pace. He's averaging 10 yards per carry. Someone like Lamar Jackson averages like 6 to 6.5 yards per carry. So that's coming way down. May also has 0 designed carries. All 20 of his carries so far are scrambles. So, he's going to keep scrambling because he can do it, and the Patriots O-line is bad, but it's less reliable when the Pats aren't calling any designed runs for him. So I just think the rushing is going to come down considerably. I think May's a nice quarterback too. You look at the schedule. I would not want to use him this week as a quarterback 1 against the Bears. He gets the Rams next week. I think, in deeper leagues, if you're hurting at quarterback, you could use him as a quarterback 1. And then the 2 other spots, I think, on the remaining schedule, Colts week 13 and then Cardinals week 15 are the spots where I think, he could be a quarterback 1 if you're kind of, platooning at the position.
Yeah, we'll see about that Cardinals matchup even. That's the same spot where Caleb Williams just performed pretty poorly this past week. So I agree. If you look at how he has finished among fantasy QBs, it seems like we should have Drake Maye higher and we should probably feel pretty good about using him. It's just a few games so far. And he has also had a pair of 2 INT games among those. So that's a tough guy to trust as your starter, even if it has worked out to this point. So we'll certainly keep watching it. Wide receivers, Quentin Johnston came back from injury this past week and came back into our lives on a fantasy production standpoint, Jared. But I want you to start us off with arguably the most fun stat about QJ.
Fantasy points tracks, fantasy points scored on busted coverages. Quentin Johnston leads the NFL with 30.8 fantasy points on busted coverages this season. That's 44% of his total fantasy production. I know he said, he had the touchdown last week was on a busted coverage. The touchdown against the Steelers was on a busted coverage. So, that accounted for most of his fantasy production. So that's the warning with Quentin Johnston. I still think he's worth grabbing though in a lot of fantasy leagues. He has a 19% target share in his 5 full games this season. That wasn't as exciting when the Chargers opened the season as this super run heavy offense, but since the bye week, the Chargers are 5th in neutral pass rate, 61% neutral pass rate. They've gone from 23 pass attempts per game over their first 4 games to 33 per game over their last 4. So 10 additional attempts per game. Do some quick math and 19% target share. That's, basically 2 extra targets per game for Quentin Johnston. And again, he's playing well. The busted coverage is one thing. You can't hold it against them. Like, he's capitalizing the opportunities. He looks a lot better than he did as a rookie. Wide receiver 4, I think, is how I'm viewing him at this point. Definitely someone you can use as we can continue to work through these bye weeks.
Yeah, and just in case you're not familiar, busted coverage, you might hear that and be like, well, doesn't that mean he's beating defenses? No, busted coverage means the defense screwed up and allowed him to do something. As you just said, you can't hold that against a player, but we also need to factor it in when we're projecting ahead for what to expect in upcoming games. Now, as you said, the Chargers are passing more, which is obviously a plus for the guy who is running as their number 2 target. Justin Herbert is good. We know that. We've seen that over several years. And Ladd McConkey is pretty good as well and also works in a shorter range to Quentin Johnston. So those two could complement each other well. Quentin Johnston's big. He's fast. He's got Ladd McConkey share in the field. He's got a team that's throwing the ball more. So I'm not counting on him as a wide receiver 3 going forward, but he has the potential to give us wide receiver 3 numbers on multiple occasions the rest of the way. So I agree with trying to put him on rosters now. I like him better than the next guy on our list, Demarcus Robinson, who also seems like he's in a good spot. We know historically it's a nice place to be a wide receiver 3 to get numbers with the Rams. But I think people need to be careful not to overrate Demarcus Robinson's week 9 numbers, right?
Yeah, and even the week 8 numbers. Robinson has 4 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks on 8 catches. And then you also had, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp were a bit limited in terms of snaps in that week 8 game coming off the injuries. And then Puka got tossed just before halftime of this past week's game, and much of Robinson's production came after that. So definitely be careful with Robinson. Like, he's worth adding if you're hurting at wide receiver. I think in fab leagues, he's probably going to go for it for too much. Don't go overboard bidding on Demarcus Robinson. I definitely like Quentin Johnston better, like you said, Matt. But this is a guy, we had him as a deep sleeper in the preseason because he was a top 35 wide receiver once he moved into a full-time role over the second half of last season. So like it's possible he kind of keeps running hot, especially in the touchdown department. I just think he's obviously still the clear number 3 wide receiver in this passing game.
6 of his 9 targets in that game against Seattle and 4 of his 6 catches, including both touchdowns, came after Puka got ejected from that game. So yeah, a lot of it without Puka in the game. Demarcus Robinson's not a guy to get because you want to start him. He's a guy to keep around in a deepish league in case you don't have a better option. Then you say, I'll play Rams third receiver and hope that he gets opportunities in this game.
And I would say the thing too, I mean, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua have already been hurt this season. Like if either guy suffers another setback or gets hurt again, like then Robinson becomes someone you can consider using as a wide receiver 3 or 4 every week.
Yeah, Puka just hurt a knee again in practice on Friday, wound up playing through it. But, a reminder that there have been injury issues this season. Cincinnati had Mike Gesicki go off in Sunday's game against the Raiders. That is bound to make him a hot pickup on waivers this week. Jared, I think there's a bit of room for people to overrate him as well, but let me hear what you think of Mike Gesicki as a target this week and going forward.
I think people could overrate him for sure if they're thinking he's a tight end 1 the rest of the season. I mean, Mike Gesicki is the T. Higgins handcuff. He's the guy when Higgins has been out, the Bengals have used him really as the number 2 wide receiver. Gesicki's averaging 6.8 targets per game in the 4 games without T. Higgins. He's finished the last 3 games as a top 12 fantasy tight end, including leading all tight ends in fantasy points this past week. The Bengals play the Ravens on Thursday night. I would be surprised if Higgins is ready on the short week. If Higgins is out, I think Gesicki is a top 12 tight end play. Once Higgins is back, though, I think Gesicki goes back to being unusable. He was doing nothing when Higgins was healthy this season. But it's a great spot on Thursday night. We know the Ravens' big pass funnel. The Bengals are like 6-7 point underdogs. There should be plenty of passing volume to go around. So again, I think Gesicki's a strong start as long as Higgins remains out.
6.75 targets per game in 4 games without T. Higgins so far this year. 1.8 targets per game in 5 with T. Higgins so far this year. Eric All, the rookie tight end for the Bengals, also tore an ACL in that Raiders game, so he's done for the season. Maybe that gives Gesicki a bit of a boost going forward. All did beat Gesicki 12-9 in targets in those 5 games that included T. Higgins. That said, I'm not sure that all of that goes to Gesicki because they're not the same player. Eric All is more of a well-rounded tight end. Gesicki is much more of a tall slot receiver who is just designated as a tight end. So there's just as much chance that the Eric All stuff goes to Drew Sample or Tanner Hudson in those T. Higgins games going forward. And frankly, even if all of it went to Gesicki, that would be 21 combined targets in 5 games. So it's about 4 targets per game. That's like Tyler Conklin level of usage. So Mike Gesicki, like you said, a potential stud this week if T. Higgins is out, and any other games that T. Higgins might be out later this year. But be careful in games that T. Higgins is playing, at least until we see something change in those circumstances. Taysom Hill, before we get away from tight end, and if Taysom Hill's a quarterback in your league, go ahead and stop listening or click ahead to the next chapter on YouTube. But what should people know about Taysom Hill right now?
I prefer Taysom Hill as a pickup over Mike Gesicki. Now, I lean Gesicki this week in this spot if Higgins is out, but for the rest of the season, I think Taysom Hill is a better bet. He finished tight end 5 last week in PPR points. He had the 5 carries for 19 yards and a score. More importantly, though, caught 4 or 5 targets for 41 yards. Season high 47% route rate for Taysom Hill. He played a season high 35 snaps on offense. He was in the backfield at either quarterback or running back for 11 of those. He was in line at tight end for 10 of those. He was in the slot or out wide on 14 of those. I think at this point, with Rashid Shaheed out for the season, Chris Olave, his 5th documented concussion last week, I think he's going to miss multiple games, potentially go on IR like we saw with Tua. I think we're going to have Taysom Hill play a decent rushing role and be pretty involved in the passing game. And that's key because like even good Taysom weeks, like he'd be inside our top 10 in non-PPR. PPR, he would still be like, tight end 17 or tight end 18 because we were just projecting like 1 catch per game. That's just tough in PPR. It's only 1 catch per game, but if we can start getting him, 2, 3, 4 catches per game with the rushing role, with the goal line role, like I think we're talking about a potential top 12 fantasy tight end the rest of the way.
He's had 5 games so far this year, 4 that he didn't leave early, finished 2 of those 5th among PPR tight ends. And last week doubled his season reception total with 4 catches in that game. So yeah, if he could add any receptions on a regular basis, that would obviously be good for his fantasy outlook. You'll find even more options in our weekly waiver wire pickups article live now on draftsharks.com, including today's editions of Khalil Herbert and Mike Williams, complete with bid recommendations on every player mentioned, as well as players worth dropping, because you got to get rid of somebody in most cases if you're going to pick up a player. You can also find separate articles for the IDP waiver targets, as well as the top streaming defense options for week 10. Jared, let's move on to those streaming defenses now. Top option for week 10. It's got to be the Giants facing the Panthers in Germany, right?
Yeah, the Giants, who still lead the NFL in sacks with 35. They're 5-point favorites in this game. The Panthers have the 5th lowest implied total. So I definitely think the Giants are the top streaming option of the week. Assuming the Chargers are not available, I just want to give them a shout out because they're still only owned in 58% of sleeper leagues. We've mentioned them a few times for the schedule that includes this week against Tennessee. We'll see whether it's Will Levis or Mason Rudolph. Either way, the Titans have the lowest implied total on the week at 15.25. So I think the Chargers, if they're available, easily the top ad this week.
Yeah, I agree with that. For the Panthers, Bryce Young did at least take only 3 sacks over the past 2 games, but last week also marked the first time this season in a game that he's played that they scored more than 14 points. So the Giants, the risk with them recently has been allowing points. They've allowed 26 plus to 3 straight opponents, much lower risk on that front against the Panthers this week. And the Giants also had 4+ sacks in 4 straight games before that Washington contest. Looking ahead to week 11, the Saints are at home for the Browns. We know there's upside. There's some downside risks still to Jameis Winston there, but also plenty of upside to that matchup if you want the Saints. And then the Dolphins at home for the Raiders. I might even like the Dolphins as a higher floor option once we get to week 11 than the Saints.
Yeah, I think higher floor for sure. I think the Saints beat them in upside, but we'll even see if it's Jameis Winston. I mean, I hope it is, but they could go to Dorian Thompson-Robinson, which would be just as good of a matchup for the Saints. So Saints and Dolphins are my 2 favorites. If you're looking for another, I think the Rams versus the Patriots, another, not a great defense, but we know Drake Maye has been turning it over, been taking some sacks. I think the floor is even lower for the Rams than those other 2 teams, but there is some sack and takeaway upside.
Yeah, we'll see when we get to that one. I might be a little hesitant about starting the Rams defense against Drake Maye, depending some on what he looks like this week. But he's been a tougher matchup because of increasing the chances of the Patriots scoring points.
For sure.
If you want to see exactly how all these options stack up with your roster and any other available players in your specific league, check your free agent finder on draftsharks.com. It is synced with your league to apply our projections to your specific scoring system, to give you a range of sorting options, and to gauge your waiver targets by what's actually available in your specific league. Why do we build a tool like that? Because we want to be your unfair advantage.